studies students because libraries are a really critical, integral part of American culture. And I only just found out recently that we shouldn't just assume that a nation has public libraries. I just learned recently there's no such thing in Egypt, for example. You have to pay if you want to use a so-called public library.
The idea of a public library is unique to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thing I learned in library school.
Okay. So we're not here to convert you all to a career path in librarianship.
I am.
And I'm so glad that Rakeshia's here because she's going to make me seem like as dull as I am, and you're all going to say, wow, there was this really great woman on the speaker panel. So,
librarians are rock stars. I'm sure they all know that.
Okay, so we're really setting a climate here of casualness. So, and I hope that gets all of you, and I'm standing like I'm the boss lady, but I'm trying to project. Yeah, I think that, we are going to have, we're inviting questions from you, but we will have some questions to get the conversation going. So my name is Beth Evans. I'm a librarian here. Some of you may have seen me at the reference desk. One of the areas that I'm particularly interested in the library is an area called scholarly communication, which is a lot about getting research material open access so that you don't have to go through a paywall. You wouldn't have to log in to get to information. And I kind of see open access as a sort of flip side of the idea of not censoring books, because it's all about making sure people can read what they want to read. So I'm honored to have the opportunity to introduce to you our three stellar guests, each who has, in a particular way, contributed to increased access to information, ideas, and the creative work of voices often ignored, sometimes silenced, and always critical for our greater growth as individual readers and listeners, and also for our society as a whole. I'm grateful for the support of the Brooklyn College Library, our Chief Librarian, Mary Mallory, the Office of the Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences, and the Interim Dean, Dr. Rosamond King, the Ethel Wolf Institute for the Humanities, and its Interim Director, Dr. Gaston Alonso, the Brooklyn College Women's Center, and its Director, Sal Fong Au, and the American Studies Program, and its Director, Diana Penn, and all of the other offices, departments, faculty, and staff that have contributed to make this program possible. Today's program will be a somewhat informal question and answer forum where I'll ask the guests several prepared questions, and then I'll turn the microphone over to our audience so that you will all have a chance to ask questions that are burning in your hearts as well. In addition to our Q&A forum here in the Woody Tanger Auditorium, one of our guests, Olaronke Akinmowo, will be hosting a book swap at the installation of her work, the Free Black Women's Library. And I hope you all saw that on the way in. Yeah, it's in the front of the library. For those who don't have books to swap, no worries. We have had a number of generous donations from a number of sources, and this will enable you to participate. So now let me introduce each of the speakers, and we'll begin the forum. First, we have Olaronke. Ola is an interdisciplinary artist, a set director for film and TV. She's also the creator, director of the Free Black Women's Library, a Black feminist, womanist art project based in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. This literary hub and creative co-working community care space feature a collection of 5,000 books written by Black women and Black non-binary writers, free public programs, a virtual reading club, and a weekly book swap. Ola has received artist fellowships and residencies from NYFA, Women's Studio Workshop, Brick Arts, Robert Blackburn Printmaking Shop, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, Hyperallergenic, Teen Vogue, and Bust magazine. She's a proud mom, union member, cultural worker, busybody, book fairy, plant fiend, and dance machine.
It's not true.
Go Union Labor.
That's what makes you so complete. Okay. Summer Boismier is the teen, at the end there, the teen project manager at Brooklyn Public Library, where she supports young adult initiatives such as Books Unbanned, she's got the shirt to prove it, and the Intellectual Freedom Teen Council. An Oklahoma expat and former English teacher, she was the District Teacher of the Year for Piedmont Public Schools in 2019 and was recognized that same year by the Oklahoma State Department of Education as a Rising Star Educator. Summer received her Master of Education in Instructional Coaching from Southwestern Oklahoma State University in 2019. She's currently pursuing a doctoral degree in instructional leadership and academic curriculum with an emphasis on English education at the University of Oklahoma. Summer's professional areas of interest include intellectual freedom, sharpening and affirming student voice, and culturally sustaining inclusive education for all. Our third speaker is Rakeshia Kearns-White. Ms. Kearns-White is Brooklyn Public Library's sex-positive, BTS-loving, period advocate and young adult librarian. She has worked for the past 18 years in the youth wing at the library's Central Branch. Her focus over the past 6 years has been facilitating puberty and sexuality education for teens, advocating for the prevention of compassion fatigue in library workers, and making the public library a welcoming space for all. She is also the 2022 recipient of Brooklyn Public Library's Dr. Lucille C. Thomas Award for Excellence in Librarianship, and this is the good part, and a card-carrying member of the BTS Army. Is anyone else here in the Army? The Army was just on NPR this morning. Does anyone, any NPR nerds in the room? Because apparently in the Philippines, there are a bunch of women in their 30s who are a huge part of BTS Army. So you got a lot of
I'm not
company.
in the Army, but I'm in the Navy.
Okay.
The Rihanna Navy.
Rihanna Navy, for sure.
So I think this is when the music is supposed to come up in the background, but I don't have that going on. So I'm grateful to all of you for being here with us today for what I know will be a most interesting discussion. So let's begin. And I'm going to start with Summer, and who recently joined the ranks of library champions, more recently, I think, than the rest of us. So Summer, could you tell us how you found your way to doing the work you do?
Sure. Before I answer that question, though, I think it's really important to kind of foreground and center the folks who give us the language and the terminology to push back against injustice and censorship. And a lot of that language comes from scholars of color, specifically Black women. I know I've cited numerous times Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, Geneva Gay, Gloria Ladson-Billings, Bell Hooks, and Kimberly Crenshaw. So in thinking about those words, I came to libraries, and I came to, this experience, way back when I was very small. Some of my first memories are of family, reading, Mother Goose, all of those old fairy tales, and I can remember going to the library from a very young age, and there's something so thrilling, I think, as a young kid, to go to a library and be able to not only pick whatever you want, but any amount of whatever you want. As a young kid who doesn't have a credit card or cash, I don't have cash now as an adult, but you don't have to ask your parents, right? You've got that library card. And it was kind of that thrill, I think, that hooked me initially. And for me, stories have always been a kind of escape, right? To quote Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, right? They are mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And the scholarship since has added a bunch of other different objects to that. So prisms, telescopes, kaleidoscopes, blankets. Walk into a home goods store, point at anything, and that's been used as a metaphor for reading at some point. So in high school, fantasy in particular was really important to me. I lost my dad really young when I was 15, so the same age as a lot of my students that I've taught. And stories were really that escape for me. So I went to school, I encountered stories, and that's where I felt seen, that's where I felt heard, that's where I felt empowered. And as an educator, that was something I always wanted for my students as well. Is at some point in your day, I want you to feel safe, I want you to feel like you can be yourself, and stories are a great vehicle to do those things. So I've been teaching for about 9 years. Well, 8 years and 1 day. I'm counting that 1 day, though, as my 9th year. Back in my home state of Oklahoma, there's a law called HB 1775. It is, it's known as an anti-CRT law. It's basically fill-in-the-blank bigotry. And what it has done is produced a lot of soft censorship. So teachers in my school, in my district, and across the state were told to either restrict or remove student access to texts in classroom libraries and school libraries because it might violate the law. For lack of a better word, that is profoundly stupid. So I'm a rule follower. I complied, I covered my shelves, I did it, but I did something else as well. I added to those shelves a QR code, and that QR code would link students to this fantastic initiative from Brooklyn Public Library called Books Unbanned. So any student ages 13 to 21 across the country can get a BPL e-card for free and have access to our library's entire e-collection and databases. That didn't go over well with the powers that be. I ended up resigning because I feel like I can't do my job under the threat of soft censorship. And I feel like I owe my students my voice in that sense, to stand up and speak for them when they may not always be able to do that themselves. So long story short, I'm now here in Brooklyn. Let me tell you, it's thrilling to be in a place where sidewalks actually take you somewhere. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten lost on the subway. Did you all know that there's a difference between a local and an express train?
Yes.
Of course.
I didn't.
I've been taking the train for like 60 years, starting here now. Like that's how I'm used to this stuff.
All right, well, and I guess I can go then, right? So with my work at Brooklyn Public Library, I get to reach a much larger group of teens. So teens in every state, really. Oklahoma, New York, California. And in thinking about this process and the choices that kind of got me to this point, the only thing I regret is that I didn't do it sooner. My home state is currently revoking my teaching certificate for sharing access to a library with high school students. And I am very much motivated by revenge.
Go on now.
Thank you.
Revenge is a great motivator.
So thank you for kind of leading us along your own personal journey from libraries to employment in a library. I'm going to turn to Rakeshia and Ola. Rakeshia, how about your story? How did you wind up where you are and what you're doing?
Oh, it's a long winding road. I know you can't tell by my good looks because black don't crack. I'm actually 50 years old. So I started college when there was no internet. Originally, I wanted to be a journalist, and because I had learned about the likes of like Edward R. Murrow and other investigative reporters, specifically Edward R. Murrow, like uncovering the McCarthyism, the fake Red Scare that he created, and that's what I wanted to do. So I went to school to become a journalist. I went to New York University, and I spent many afternoons in the library doing lots of research for my different classes and learning how to be a journalist. And I went on to work at a company that's no longer around, but you may have heard the name. Anybody familiar with the name Time Warner?
No.
Okay, so there used to be this great media giant. It started off as Time Inc., and it had such magazines as Time Magazine, Life Magazine, because before TVs were around and before 24-hour news stations, Time and Life Magazine provided the news. Life Magazine is still famous for its pictures, and they gave a window into the world, and Time gave the words. They became a company known as Time Inc., and then Time Inc. Was bought by Warner Brothers, which is the movies that bring you DC Comics. Okay, we know about that, right? Then it got bought by Turner Broadcasting, who owns the Atlanta Braves. Okay, so, and then we merged with American Online, AOL. This is all pre-2000, just to let you know. So we were a huge media conglomerate, magazines, movies, and the internet. And I started there in 1994. I worked at Life Magazine for 5 years. Then I went on to move on to Teen People Magazine, where mostly I did reporting and research. And reporting is a little bit different at Time Inc. magazines. Reporting is doing a lot of research and background checks, so everything in a story is accurate and correct, known as fact checking. So there's no misinformation. For a lot of you who do research papers or are interested in journalism or think you're following a credible news source, let me tell you that you're not, because no one fact checks anymore. Okay, that's why you should never trust anything you see on TikTok or Twitter. It's not nuanced and it's not fact checked. That's what also librarians do. We teach people how to find credible sources. But I didn't have a passion for journalism. I didn't have the cutthroat ambition. At the time, there was a mass school shooting, which was not as regular as it is now in Colorado, but not Columbine. It was pre-Columbine. And what happened was that everyone at the magazine got excited to go cover the story. And then I was like, this is horrible. And then at the same time, do we all know who Monica Lewinsky is? Do we all know who Bill Clinton is? Okay, so the Monica Lewinsky and the Bill Clinton scandal was breaking because Bill Clinton was being impeached. But instead of focusing on what Bill Clinton was being impeached for, which was some like real estate lying thing, they were focusing a lot about the sex that he had with Monica Lewinsky. And they released the Star Report, which felt like reading your parents' pornographic diary. It was gross. And I said, this is not why I went into journalism. I came to journalism to help people, to give them information. And my mentor noticed that I was not cut out for it and said, well, you seem really good at research. You work well with our library because Time Inc. has its own specialized library. You should consider becoming a librarian. And I did. I went to library school at night while I worked full time for 5 years. And then I started at the Brooklyn Public Library in 2005. And brings me all the way to today, where I started off just pointing people in the direction of Black history books, because I started in February, to being like and I don't think I overstate this when I now consider myself one of BPL's most subversive librarian. If you come, and I tell people all the time, if you send your child to the library thinking it's going to be a sweet, wholesome experience and they run into me, your child is going to leave with their third eye open. You're going to come to the library and goes, I want my child to read a classic, and they'll pick out a book by a dead old white man. And I said, this does not even, we have books that were written in the 21st century that has the same theme. And I will put books in your hand by, I Octavia Butler. I put Books in Your Hand by, what's my man's name? Sherman Alexie. And other, I mean, he's got issues, but, you know, you will get Dominican authors, you will get queer authors, you will get Latinx authors that all tell our stories, right? That, you know, and then people will fight me and say, but these are classics. I said, who told you they were classics? You only think it's classics because that's the master narrative, okay? And we all know what the master narrative is. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Oh, master narrative. My 17, well, now she's 18, but my 17-year-old told me what the master narrative is. I didn't even know it had a word or phrase. It's the opposite of CRT. It's basically telling you that everything that white people did is good. Colonialism was great. And as a matter of fact, most maps that you see with the size of Europe and European countries, it's inaccurate. They made the continent of Africa and Latin America smaller in comparison to the European countries, because that's how racist they are. So, and then I started offering puberty and sex ed workshops for teens and tweens at the library, because at the same time my kids were going through puberty and asking me questions that I did not have the answers for. So I started taking classes and then started teaching them, because I also realized that teens and tweens were woefully misinformed, and not only woefully misinformed, but they also had the internet in their hand. And for example, if you Google something like uncircumcised penis, because you want to know what that is, guarantee you'll get like 20 porn hits before you actually get like a scientific drawing. And I'm using 20 loosely. I don't know, you know, it'll probably be 20,000. So I said, I need to intervene. And my first sex ed class at BPL was with a group of 12-year-old boys. I said, ask me anything. First, they were afraid. I said, trust me, I've been married for close to 20 years. I have 2 kids. I know everything. And they was like, okay. The first thing they said, squirting. I said, listen, that's like, no. And it's not going to happen. I said, that is like a Marvel movie. That's porn. And they were like, oh. I was like, dude, Pornhub. I know what Pornhub is. And they were just, oh. I was like, yeah. And then I went into a conversation about how girls actually like sex, and they were surprised by that too. So they also surprised as such a thing as called reciprocal pleasure, because no one taught them that even though if they wanted girls to perform oral sex on them, that maybe the girls would want to have it performed on them as well. So this is what I teach, and this is what I respond to. And then finally, I went on to start not an organization, but an initiative called the Cycle Alliance, which is a pro-period equity advocacy group for teens. And our mission is to destigmatize, degender conversations about menstruation, and also to fight period poverty. And I just talked to some teens last week. Are you familiar with the concept of period poverty? Okay, period poverty is means you lack access to information about menstruation and periods. You lack access to period products like pads and tampons. You lack access to a place to perform menstrual hygiene, like a clean or private bathroom. And when you think of that definition, where do you think, what part of the world do you think suffers from period poverty? Just shout it out. Okay. Yes, that's right. The teens I said last week said the Middle East. Some said Africa. I said the United States, and also in most Western industrialized, quote unquote, first world nations. And it's also inherently in patriarchy and racism and capitalism, because period poverty strikes most Black and brown women of color, and also non-binary and trans people of color, because women aren't the only ones who have periods. And when you can't have access to period products, what happens? You miss days from school, you miss days from work, you don't get paid, you get a loss in your education, and the cycle of poverty continues. And the government actually doesn't really support it. They don't see it as a health crisis, mainly because they only think of it as a female/women's problem, not understanding that women and trans people are a vital part of our community and families. Once the community and families break down, whole society breaks down economically, and because that's what they like to think about is the economy. And now have a period pantry I opened up about 6 weeks ago, where through product donations, people can come to my branch of the Brooklyn Public Library and get free maxi pads, tampons, disposable period underwear, menstrual cups, etc. I was just interviewed about this on a CBS News and a Russian news channel. So I'm probably also on some watch list now because the Russians interviewed me. So remember me fondly?
Thank you, Rakeshia. I do want to go to Ola, but I can't help after hearing Rakeshia's narrative there that I first saw her name in a professional library mailing that was announcing a program she was doing for librarians about the menstrual literacy program. And that was the first time I ever saw that term. And that's just sort of a reminder of how many things need to be done that haven't been done, that are finally being done. And we got to get the word out about them. And here's a quick story. I have to share this because it happened last night with my adult daughter. And it's a part of that whole reproductive frame, if I could talk about it. So her 2-year-old is close to being weaned. She has many, many bags of frozen breast milk in her freezer. He doesn't want any part of it anymore. He's lost his taste for it. And she said to me, I don't know what I'm going to do with all of this, that I worked so hard in a storage room pumping for a year. Because when you mention people not having access to clean, safe space to take care of normal human bodily functions, I can't tell you what happened to me in a supermarket years ago with one of my kids when I was nursing, but that's that anyway. But on to Ola, please. Can you tell us the path that took you to what's a really unique library that you created?
Tough acts to follow here. Sure. So basically, I'm an artist and a book lover, and that's always been the case for my whole life. So I think it starts there, and then flash forward to adulthood and engaging with a lot of community activism work and organizing work that center the safety and health of Black women and Black girls and Black queer folks, and engaging around work that dealt with state violence, specifically police violence, and wanting to create some momentum around amplifying the stories of Black women and girls who've been victims of police, as well as suffered discrimination within the medical industrial complex or the prison system. And doing that work for a while and battling with the community interpersonally, as well as the outside community, started to feel very discouraging and debilitating for my spirit. So I decided to take a pivot and use my artistry and my love for books to create this project, because I wanted to do something that still centered Black women and Black girls, but not approach it from a place of we are victims, we are being oppressed constantly, we are dying, someone help us, someone save us, someone support us. Because that just wasn't working for me spiritually or mentally. So I decided to just combine my love for books, my Black feminist politics, and artistry to create this project in 2015 called the Free Black Women's Library. So I started the library with 100 books, all written by Black women, different genres, and basically installed the books on a brownstone stoop in Bed-Stuy on Macon and Tompkins.
I grew up not too far from there.
And at the time, I'm still a dance machine, but at the time I was a major dance machine. Um, and I put on some gold leggings and a little black top, and I made a playlist, and I just set up the books and did like a dance performance. It was very dramatic, just to attract attention. And then as people gathered around, I said to the folks, I just started this project called the Free Black Women's Library, and I have these books here for you to look at, touch, talk to me about, and if you're interested in taking any of these books home, I will trade with you as long as you bring me a book written by a Black woman. So on that day, there was a child there who was about 8 years old who wanted one of my books. She went home with her mom, came back 45 minutes later, and we traded books, and I took a picture of her with the book she was taking and the book she brought, so her trades. And that was my very first trade. And since then, I've traded thousands of books with people from all over the country, all over the world, in different spaces. So I traveled each month. I would take the books to a different location, and I would install them in this location and do some type of performance or workshop to activate the space. And as time went on, the collection started to grow. Thanks to social media, it became a phenomenon, and people started to send me books from all over the world. I would get boxes of books from professors, from librarians, from authors, from publishers, from people who are just like, I just saw your project and I love it. These are my favorite books. I want to make sure you have them in your collection. So flash forward to present day, I now have over 5,000 books, and between like the first 5 years of the project, I was traveling to different states and different parts of New York. And then when the pandemic hit, I felt that I wanted to get like a brick and mortar space to really anchor the project, because going from place to place each month was starting to feel like too much, between the fact that I didn't have a vehicle and COVID was making things weird. And I just really thought that the community really seemed to be craving a location where people could be together. So I launched a GoFundMe and raised about $110,000. I said to myself, if I can raise 100K, that means it's meant to be. And then I raised 110, and I was like, I guess it's meant to be. So the space is now in Brooklyn, and it's open 4 days a week. All the books are there, and people come and they use the space to read, to write, to work, to hang out. And I also offer workshops, writing workshops, sewing and quilting workshops, drawing. We have conversations about reproductive justice and maternal health. We still talk about political prisoners in the prison industrial complex. We talk about sexual harassment, street harassment as a form of violence. We talk about banned books. We read poetry together. We watch films together. And people also just use the space to just be themselves. I have an elder woman who comes in like every weekend, and she just reads children's books. And I love her for that. I have people who come in on dates and they just kind of sit and hold hands while they read. I'm just like, I love that for you. So it's just a space where people can be themselves and also engage with other folks in deep, rigorous discourse around very specific issues that we're dealing with. We can talk about like life strategies. We can talk about health issues like mental health, getting mental health services, gentrification. And we also have playful moments. We also have game days where we play charades and it gets really competitive. But yeah, that's how I landed here. Speaking to y'all is through my love for books and my love for libraries. I always remember going to the library as a young person and just feeling like I don't have to answer to anyone here. Like, I'm very introverted, not a people person at all. And I just felt like the librarians would just let me be. And I said, my community, Black women specifically, Black queer folks specifically, who are constantly having to like perform and mask and be a certain way when we're out in the public because you don't want to offend, or it sometimes can get a little taxing. So I wanted us to have a space where people can just not have to worry about that. And it's open to everyone. But we definitely center Black feminist thought, which means that it's an inclusive, accessible space that honors the humanity of all peoples. So y'all are always welcome to come. If you need a place to like study or meet with a friend to co-study, I'm very codependent, so I like studying with people. I don't know about y'all. But yeah, and we have a book club that meets on the last Sunday of every month over Zoom. And I love the book club because it's truly global. And we get people from like Beirut, Pakistan, like Kenya, like Canada, like France, like Greece, who come. And it's really fun to see that engagement, especially because people have such different perspectives depending on where they're at. It was only recently that I learned that public libraries are a U.S. thing too, and it was from book club. So I was like, wow, kind of from point of privilege a little bit. But that's how I landed here. I think I answered the question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Let me just check on the time because I had a feeling these wonderful speakers would do exactly what they did, which is pretty much fill up the time, and my remaining questions I think were pretty much covered. I mean, I can certainly nudge them on a little bit more, but I think what might be more interesting at this point, because we have about 15 minutes left, is to turn to all of you. And if you have any questions for the speakers or any thoughts you want to share about your experiences with library, just to sort of put it in a context of where we are here. I think what was described at Brooklyn Public Library and at the Free Black Women's Library doesn't even seem to resemble what's going on in this building. You can nod your head if you think like, yeah, that doesn't sound like this place. Which is not to denigrate a really important and critical institution. Again, an NPR reference, but this morning I heard about a situation in Vermont where there's a consolidation of several colleges, and one of the pieces of that plan was to eliminate the physical book stacks. Now,
I know what you're talking about.
okay, yeah, library news in the news, but they're walking that back a little.
They should, because
walk it back. Okay,
they should walk it back because there is still a technological digital divide in the United States. And as someone joked, when COVID showed up like the very messy side piece and revealed all that was wrong with the United States education system and our infrastructure. There are places that still don't have cell phone towers or internet access. So, and there are also kids and adults who don't learn well on digital platforms or know how to use a computer. So the idea of getting rid of paper books or traditional books is
Frightening.
It's frightening. It's frightening. And I hate to beat the drum on this because I'm very passionate. We are in a dystopian state right now where they're trying to take away access to information and lead you into a world of being dumb, where they're suppressing the stories of every single one of you in here. Because I see women, I see Asians, I see black people, I'm sure some of your parents are immigrants. They're trying to suppress all our stories and say that we don't exist and we did not have anything to do with the development of this nation. Just so you know that this nation grew from the blood of immigrants, indigenous people, queer people, black people, women, and non-binary people, and that's the truth, and they're trying to hide it. Yeah, other countries are laughing at us because we are going backwards. This is not what the United States was supposed to be was not based on this idea, but this is what they're saying it is to be American. Hello. I just took over, I'm sorry.
Take a little bit from the mic.
Oh, okay, okay. I hope you don't mind if you take a hike here.
Yeah. I'm very loud and I'm very loud and sort of I'm like the opposite of a librarian because a lot of times people come into the library and they don't expect to see a black woman as a librarian because the librarianship profession is 86% white women.
Okay. I love it. Get loud.
All right. So in my American identity class, with right here, we read about the Oblivious Empire, which explains about the darker side of the United States, mostly with the other countries chastising the United States for not being aware of their actions. So they also wanted to add on with one of the members' comments is that there are some shows that mostly express some of the topics about with the violence, the abuse, all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm trying to make a fan fiction about this. However, the thing is, I'm trying to make sure to be more aware. We know that I want to go a bit gusty about this. We know about the sexual abuse with one getting violated by men. However, I'm gonna try to make more deeper that there are times that it can be the other way around. Is that I want to make sure that the talk can be discussed as well. Is that not even men are saving?
No, they're not. I learned a phrase last year, and I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong. It's called the hierarchy. It's like the intersectional. It's intersectional. I can't even think about the other word I want to say, but it's basically it's not just a patriarchy. It's hierarchy where not only are like women and brown people oppressed, but men are oppressed as well by gender stereotypes from the prison system, from the military, capitalism. It's all intertwined. So basically, if you're not part of a certain percentage of the economy, or have a lot of wealth, you are also being oppressed. Except, as you probably know, if you remember, like the Jim Crow laws and the idea of why they keep calling everything that happened in 2016 as part of like, oh, it was like economic stress. It's a way to cover up racism. So to make white men feel good, they told them that, they're okay, but they're not okay. If they realize that they're not okay, then the whole power structure of the United States would change.
So true.
Because the only thing they have to hold on to is whiteness. If whiteness is seen to be wrong, then they feel lost. So.
Oh, well put, Rakeshia. Yeah.
I feel same with how white felt you're good and good. And you said about the 2016 that's actually one of the few things that I really despise with Trump. I really hate that guy. The guy.
He very much is.
Is that
I'm sorry for anyone here who leans in that direction. I don't hate you personally, but I do dislike what the Republican Party is doing.
I think we have another question. Or could you come to the mic, please, or to,
Or you can project.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to pick it up. Record.
Oh,
yeah, the recording.
it's being recorded. Oh.
Hi, fellow Army. Who's your bias?
Namju.
Oh yeah. Did you read the article in the Spain newspaper? Okay, so I bring that up because the Spanish language newspaper in Spain asked him to criticize something about Korean culture, and he basically said, "How dare you? We do this because of all the imperialism and colonialism that we have had to suffer, and that if people are going to invest in art, they should invest in art by Black people and Indigenous people and women." So, so colonialism, imperialism is the gift that keeps on giving, but not only in the United States. I'm also Namju biased, that's okay.
My question was about like the librarian school and how one that like you mentioned you're gonna turn into a librarian. I wanted to know more about that.
Okay, I'm going to say go to Queens College because it's cheaper. And the only downside is I think for that you have to write a thesis or a dissertation at the end. I went to Pratt Institute because they didn't require me to take a GRE, and I'm really terrible at standardized tests. And just, since you mentioned library school, as I tell a lot of high school students and middle school students, you don't have to love to read books or be well-read to be a librarian.
That's true.
Can I ask my colleague here at Brooklyn College, Sheena Philogene,
Hi.
who I believe also went to Queens College, as I did. You seem to have something to add there.
The or capstone is not required. You can do alternate classes instead.
Oh,
Okay, so let's.
so times has changed since 1999.
I have to tell you the most difficult thing, and I'll get to your question. The most difficult thing about getting a degree at Queens College is the commute to Queens. And if the city, I don't know if you're all aware, but there were plans to extend our subway system so it would be a more inclusive system. And the fact that the Depression came, that other Depression in 1929, really led to a cutoff with a lot of lines, and you'd be surprised how much bigger the system might have been. So it's a bit of a desert out there. You would have to go.
Also in parts of
I'm sorry, what?
Also in parts of Brooklyn. How many of you
Yeah.
know who Robert Moses is? Oh, please research him. Please.
Yeah,
he's from New York City. He's also very racist. And he's the reason why so many train lines do not go to deep parts of Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. Also the reason why many housing projects are named after him. And that's why the Bronx Expressway exists with that big wall separating the minorities from the white people. And it's also the reason why there are not a lot of trees in Black and brown neighborhoods.
Wow, that's
That's
less,
environmental racism.
that's less oxygen.
And
We had a
it's
question.
hotter.
I'm sorry, Rakeshia. There was a question in the back, and I don't want to. Would you come up just for the sake of? Thank you. And
Being a librarian also means you just have a lot of random facts that you pick up along the way.
that's true. We learn a lot from the people we work with, right?
And people who ask questions,
Students.
yeah.
That's true. Hi, welcome.
Hi, I'm Kelly. My question is, I guess, more directed at Keisha, if I can call you that.
Sure you can.
It really resonated with the fact that I'm a journalism major, a more recent journalism major, but I have this, I feel that I don't have maybe the ambition or the thirst for hopping on tragedies, the things that are going wrong, and I find it very comforting to see that you can take what you've learned and pivot it into something else, because as a new journalism major, it's already been something through my head where I was inspired by things similar to McCarthyism, where I want to tell people about these things that they just don't know about. But I don't know if the newsroom is for me. So I appreciated seeing the ways that you could pivot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, statistics say that all of you younger people sitting on that side of the room are likely to live to be close to 100, I think, is the current. And that's a lot of opportunity, if you want to see it that way, to have working adult lives. And I think the number now is something like you will change your career 7 times. Or there's some
Something like
crazy
that.
number. And, we've already listened to career changes up here who are relatively young people who may yet again make another pivot. So, so Kelly, thank you for your own self-realization that, what you're aiming for now may not actually be what you wind up doing. And I'm glad that Rakeshia was in her nice, firm way, able to make it feel like it's perfectly fine and natural that you can make that shift.
Yeah, I think it's very important to stay open and really think expansively, because you can literally make a career for yourself. And as Beth said, you can pivot and shift to doing different things. I think sometimes folks get very attached thinking about themselves in one specific way, and they hold on to that, and that can possibly limit you. So definitely think big and think creatively, think radically, and do your research about anything that you're interested in and anything you're passionate about. Like, do a deep dive into it. Yeah.
As I tell my children, I have a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old. The 18-year-old starting college in September. And one of the big things they always, from middle school to now, what's your major, what's your major, what's your major, because
Right.
of the uniqueness of the New York City high school system and then going into college. And I tell them all the time, what you major in may not be necessarily what you get your job in, but you are living, Gen Z, you are living in a glorious time where you can actually create your own career, your own pathway, your own way to make money that is very interdisciplinary and doing what you like or what you love or what brings you joy. If you like to draw, if you like to write fan fiction, but you also like to build computers, there you can create your own special, like Ola here, she dances and has books. I mean, I dance at the library, but I'm not, you don't want to see that. Trained dancer and artist and a librarian, like, come on.
In gold leggings and a black top.
I have worn gold leggings and a black top, but my dancing is not good.
I know there are a couple of more questions. I saw Marianne over there and then Diane over here. Yeah, Marianne, could you come? Marianne is one of my colleagues here. She's our associate archivist. And I hope you'll know what archives are, particularly we're in an American Studies class. Well, Marianne, a quick definition of the archives and then your question.
Sure. So in the archive, we collect basically primary sources. So letters, documents, oral histories, objects, maps. These are the things that people will use to write books or your textbooks. So it's very important because these primary sources need to be collected and to be preserved. And I just wanted to make a point that censorship is not just with books. It also happens in archives. And there are biases, there are gaps, there are power struggles, because who collects the stuff in the archives? The person in charge. And people collect based on their biases. So I want people to get involved because even in my own research, I haven't been able to find the documents about African Americans and other minority groups at Brooklyn College because the stuff was not considered important enough to be collected. So we need to change that. And it just goes to say that we all have to get involved because you cannot count on the archivist, the chief librarian, or these other people that are in charge of these libraries and archives to do the right thing. Because there are all these implicit biases, and we need to have our voices heard so that we don't go through this and the stuff that you guys have created and the stuff that's out there isn't considered important enough, or it's not something that the group in charge likes to collect. Mm-hmm. So, just keep that in mind. And there's a wonderful new thing in archives called rapid response collecting, which means that we're not going to wait for people to be old and dead and find things in basements and stuff like that. We're going to go out there and we're going to collect things. We're going to collect things from protests. We're going to collect things, even stuff on social media, etc. And we're going to engage in oral history so everybody's voice is heard. Sorry, that's my soapbox.
No, thank you. And you,
Your museums, your libraries, and your archives and your historical societies, they collect the culture of the people. And as long as there's censorship and banning and implicit biases, all of our stories and our history and our culture will not be preserved for future generations. So understand that this is just not about, not having access to a book. This is literally, again, wiping you from the history of the country in which you contribute and live.
yeah, there's an old statement about history is written by the victors.
Yes.
I don't know if people are still saying that, but
It's come back.
yeah. Diane?
Thank you so much for this panel and for the discussion. I'm a resident of the Brooklyn College neighborhood and a friend of Beth's, and I just wanted to say one of the things that you brought up that's so important is to stay open to how the world changes in terms of your own careers. I too went to college before the internet, and I graduated in the year 1964. I am 76 years old. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed. It became law, protecting certain equal rights as a beginning. So my career wasn't even invented until 1964. I became a civil rights lawyer and litigated civil rights. I prosecuted domestic violence. We didn't have the word domestic violence in 1964. I was an American Studies major. I discovered archives over the last several years. I'm a member of Genealogical and Historical Society. I spend a lot of time in the 16 and 1700s brewing what hasn't been kept. So to stay alive and awake to things and follow your dreams, do 2 years here, 2 years there. I have a number of degrees. I'm a student in Medgar Evers right now. The world is...
Woohoo! Thank you. So we're actually, now we're going to come to a really fun and exciting and interactive part of the program, which is, as Ola described, the Free Black Women's Library is a swapping library. And one of the things that Ola does to document the events and the experience of that is she likes to, as she mentioned, photograph the people in the swap.
Yes. If you go to my Instagram, the Free Black Women's Library, the whole thing, you'll see pictures of all the people that I've been trading books with for the past 8 years. I take a picture of people with the books they brought and the books they're taking, and that works as a visual archive for me to kind of notice different reading trends, to kind of see what books people are reading during certain times of the year. People tend to want to read romance and lighthearted stories in the summer. There was a time when people were really interested in speculative fiction and science fiction. Now people are reading more about grief and mental health. So I've been taking those pictures just to kind of keep track and also take note of the young people that I trade with and seeing them get older, going from reading picture books to chapter books to YA. So, but definitely follow me there if you want to stay in touch. And I am trading books today. If anybody has books to trade, or if anybody just wants to come and look at the collection of books that are here, I think that's what's happening now. Yeah.
Well,
but I also
aren't your books. These are books. Okay, so as I mentioned, a number of people have donated books to you to be able to swap.
I see.
With Ola's collection.
Cool.
Because, yeah,
cool.
We wanted you to be able to actually participate. So.
No problem. But I also wanted to say real quick about the whole thing about unbanned books and archives and collecting the culture of a people. We do have a special collection section within the library space, and these are books that don't get traded. They're books that are first edition, one of a kind, limited edition, and also more recently authors that have been put on these banned lists, like Toni Morrison. Have y'all heard of Toni Morrison, right? Alice Walker, Bell Hooks, June Jordan, Toni K. Bambara, Audre Lorde. All of these writers are on these banned book lists. So the library has gone from being a space, well, not gone from, but it's expanded to not just being a social art project and like a community engagement project, but it's also now feels like a space to keep these voices alive and existing. So it was very shocking for me to see all those names on the list. I was like, okay, let me just make sure that these don't go anywhere, just because you never know. It feels like they're trying to vanish and erase very specific voices. And
That feels like they
I
are.
refuse to let that happen. So
It's very funny. When I first started as a librarian, the most banned book was Harry Potter. Now, they're not even thinking about Harry. They wished Harry Potter was what everyone was reading now. Mostly the top 10 most challenged books of 2021, because that's about as far back as they have the statistics, is Gender Queer, Lawn Boy, another LGBTQ plus book. All Boys Aren't Blue, another LGBTQ plus book. Out of the Darkness, this is for sexuality and someone who's fighting domestic abuse. The Hate You Give, because it's anti-police.
we have that one.
The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, banned and challenged for profanity, sexual references, and the use of a derogatory term. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. The Bluest Eye, This Book is Gay, and Beyond Magenta, which is about LGBTQIA teens. And these were the top 10 books, most challenged books of 2021. Doesn't include 2022 yet, because it takes time for us to gather our stats. But I printed out a lot of articles with statistics in it. But just so you know,
Banned To Kill a Mockingbird, which is like
But they've been
racist.
well, they've been banning that since the ALA has been tracking it, and that's the American Library Association, an office.
Even though it's considered a classic.
Even though it's considered a classic, also Huckleberry Finn and others, because it uses the N-word. Most of the time before recently, books were being challenged because they felt it was harming, that it was too racist or, too degrading to the population. Now it's a different population who's banning the books, and it's not because they're trying to protect people's delicate souls. They're trying to prevent stories being told that they don't want being told.
Do you guys have a recommendation for online databases to get access?
You want online databases from BPL to find books, or just to do research?
Like research, get access to these specific things.
Okay.
Specifically banned books.
I mean, do you have a Brooklyn Public Library card?
Well,
You have access to everything.
Can
if you
I
want.
do a little local pitch here? And also as a Brooklyn College and CUNY student, certainly. So I think your question is to find books that specifically have been banned, how to identify them or unbanned. Yeah, so, the Brooklyn Public Collection as well as Brooklyn College, if you do particular titles, or people can recommend particular titles, or a librarian here could, that you can then look up here, and as far as whether or not they're available in print or electronic, both, we can help you see that from online catalog.
If you go to the Brooklyn Public Library website, we do have curated book lists that's by librarians, and you can find lists about most banned books or whatever topic you're looking for. And in terms of databases, right now databases aren't being banned, although in some states they are trying to ban access to certain databases, like EBSCO, which does a lot of the research ones, just so not only can kids not get the fiction books about banned topics, they can't even do research about the banned topics. So there's a lot of invasion of privacy happening as well. This is a First Amendment issue that's just greater than the right to read.
Wow.
Did I see another hand over here? No? Okay. Oh, hi, back there.
Hi there. I guess I was just curious. I read an article in regards to Internet Archive,
Mm-hmm.
the AI systems that are being implemented with like the information and the access to it.
Okay.
And I know a case in regards to Internet Archive is coming up right now, but I guess I was just curious your thoughts on Internet Archive and it also attached to the access to databases and information.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is not my lane. The internet archiving.
Can I address that one? So are you talking about the issue around controlled digital lending, possibly? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, there was a decision that because a lot of libraries physically closed, that the Internet Archive, which has sort of made it its own business to archive web content, but they're also interested in access to really any content that suddenly becomes inaccessible. So really all the printed books were inaccessible for a long period of time. And so during this emergency period, scanned copies of books that were available in print but not electronically through certain libraries became available through the Internet Archive. But they respected the idea of one book per user at a time. And so if you checked out the book from the electronic collection, you had the only copy, even though for all of us it sounds a little absurd because it's electronic. Many people should be able to see it at the same time. But they were respecting what's in our copyright law, which is this thing called the right of first sale, which means if you buy a book, all right, if I buy one of the books that's in this bag here, I bought this book, I could give it to Rakeshia, she could give it to Summer, Summer could give it to Ola, and Ola could put it in her library.
Better than PowerPoint.
And it's one copy, and people could do whatever they want with that one copy. So in a system of controlled digital lending, what theorists have said is that, you know what, a book isn't really about this paper. The book is about the content. And so if we make the content of this book available electronically, and we put this away in a room somewhere, that's the same thing, same book. But what happened as we kind of eased out of the period of the pandemic and the publishers were aware of what was happening, they got kind of edgy, and it was like, no, you bought a printed copy, you can't give people access to an electronic copy. A problem, though, for libraries, and this is for Brooklyn Public as much as for us here in CUNY, is that the publishers are charging extraordinary prices for electronic copies. They're putting all kinds of restrictions on lending practices so that, for example, they may give you a license to lend the book out, say, 30 times, and then the license ends, and if you want to continue to lend that book out, you have to pay for a new license. And so they're becoming very restrictive with electronic access at the same time that libraries are relying more and more on either buying or subscribing to books electronically. So with the Internet Archive, which is very much a kind of open access movement, they're pushing back against that, and they're continuing to make the argument that, this content, it's about the content, it's not about the media. It's not if it's a printed book or electronic, it's the same thing. And so, this is something that's working its way through the legal system. But I hope I addressed your question. I'm not sure if I quite answered it, but I'm glad that you brought up the Internet Archive because it's a wonderful organization, and it's responsible for this thing called the Wayback Machine. And if you ever try to find a website that has disappeared, and again, we're talking about information either willingly disappearing or on purpose being disappeared, the Wayback Machine has a record of a lot of content that people either would rather you didn't see or that inadvertently has disappeared. So thanks for that question. So please, if you would like to participate in the swap, you don't have a book with you for swapping that meets the criteria. And Olaronke, take a quick look. Yeah. And we'll be heading out to the front of the library. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.
You were an amazingly attentive audience.